All right, the Courthouse Steps auctions. All right, the Courthouse Steps auctions are pretty cool. I like Courthouse Steps. It took me many years before I got into those. If you watch a lot of flipping shows, you're going to see Courthouse Steps quite often, and it's pretty cool. They're very fun. They're very engaging. With that being said, however, they're risky. They're high risk, high reward. So you can see I've given you these marketing things in the order you should be doing them. I didn't start doing the Courthouse Steps until we were doing about 100 houses a year, and we had exhausted all the easier options like MLS and wholesaling and sending letters and bandit signs, and we just felt like we couldn't get any more from those without getting like diminishing returns. Like we spend more money but we just don't get the same return. So we started exploring the Courthouse Steps, and a quick little story is that we actually had a guy named Adam who worked for us go to the Courthouse Steps for months and months and watch them and track the results and see what people were bidding and go learn to do the research. This took us about 6 months to learn every detail of what to do and how to do it for the Courthouse Steps before we felt comfortable, because the big thing with the Courthouse Steps is it's very high risk, very sometimes high reward. If you're doing it incorrectly, it could be very low reward, but it can be beaten and it can be good money, but when you get it wrong, you really get it wrong. So let's jump into some of the pros and cons. The first is that there's potential for great profit. I've seen some pretty good deals. Some of my best deals this year came from the Courthouse Steps. With that being said, some of my worst deals also came from there too. And my belief is they kind of balance out a little. If you get a great deal, you're probably going to end up getting some crappy ones too. At the end of the day, Courthouse Steps ends up being about the same return on investment for me as like a letter or maybe a probate mailer. I only do those because I've gotten to the point where I'm doing enough volume that it starts to make sense. Second thing is, it's not really for new investors. It's just, the new investors who go to Courthouse Steps, it's just not really good for you guys because it's going to require some common knowledge. It's going to require like some educated guessing. There's definitely going to be you taking in like a lot of assumptions. And when you're new, your assumptions aren't very good. You don't really have a lot of prior history to feed off of. So I had done close to about 800 or 900 deals before I did my first Courthouse Steps, and that gave me a real advantage when I was going there because I could look at a house that I couldn't get into, and I could really almost look at it from the outside and have and maybe peek in the window, and I could get a really good guess of what it was going to cost me to renovate it. So you want to make sure that there's going to be less new investors. So how this is a pro, and you're probably wondering, okay, Michael, well, that sounds more like a con. Actually, probably I'm giving you the con of it, but the pro of it is that there won't be a lot of new investors there. So, okay, when you're there bidding as a more savvy investor, this is pretty cool because you won't see a lot of people there willing to pay too much. Because for the most part, it's the barrier of entry into the Courthouse Steps because of all the knowledge you have to have about title work and lien searches and all that you're not going to get as many new people there. So the good news is most of the people who are there are savvy investors, so they're buying according to that. They are buying with the understanding that they know the numbers, so you won't get people bidding it up as much as you think. Now, sometimes and often you'll see things get bid up like crazy, but it's just because some of the savvy investors are doing way too much. I also like the Courthouse Steps because there's no marketing cost. So it's been my big reason that I've been doing it because I'm always really big on finding stuff that doesn't cost me money. What I did find out with doing it over the last 2 years is that I do have a time cost. So I might not have a marketing cost, but there is a cost to my time. The reason we stopped doing the Courthouse Steps about 6 months ago is because it ate so much of my time, and I got into coaching and helping other people, and I realized I don't really have enough time to there's just certain parts of that job that I couldn't delegate out safely because it really required my level of knowledge in order to minimize the risk that came with it. So that being said, it is a low marketing cost, but a very high time and investment of time. Now, some of the cons are you're buying these all the time with no inspection. Now, you can get into them sometimes, but sometimes you can't get into them. So most of the time, you actually can't even legally get into them. Now, sometimes they're vacant, and you might be maybe the door's busted in. You can go in and look, or you might have a set of keys to get in, like bank keys, like some of us have locally. Those things exist, but that's the closest thing to an inspection that you're going to do is looking through the windows, or maybe going in if one of the doors are open. Beyond that, if people live in the house, and this is probably more than right around about half my deals, I get people actually live in the house, so you really can't get in and see anything, and you got to hope that it's good in there. And sometimes you go in and it's really nice, and sometimes you go in and you're like, oh man, what did I buy? So you get no inspections, and it's pretty rough for that reason. You also, it's like a very high risk, time consuming process. So again, the risky part of this is that they're going to ask you to put non-refundable deposits down. Now, these deposits aren't usually very small. I can tell you on average, my deposits run somewhere between, on the very low end, about 10K to about 25K. Now, I want you to imagine buying a property you can't go inside, putting 25K down that you can't get back if you find out it was a dud. I mean, that's just the amount of risk that we should, as savvy investors, we should never have to take that amount of risk. That's why we stopped doing it recently, because it just wasn't worth the risk. I might get back into it because I have a great system where I can minimize a lot of this risk. But if you're new, I would say stay away from this 100%. This isn't even worth having a conversation about. So many new students will ask me, should I do the Courthouse steps? And I'm like, if you can't figure out how to get a deal from a wholesaler or the MLS or from a letter or a bandit sign, then you got no chance of making this Courthouse step thing work, because Courthouse steps is no joke. I mean, it is savvy investors there, and they team up against you and they'll bid against you. They know you're new, they can smell it, and they'll just try to take you out. And I might sound like I'm being like overly dramatic about this, but I am not. It is like it is a bunch of pit bulls there. You know, I've been doing this a really long time, and I go there and I really like see that I need to be in my place, because normally I'm the king of the hill in most situations. I go to Courthouse steps, and that's not the case for sure. Those guys are savvy as can be, so you got to be really careful. Next thing is that, yeah, we talked about the non-refundable deposits. So that's probably the biggest piece of this, would be the fact that you put these big crazy deposits on houses you have no understanding. You got to hope someone didn't bid you up and do something crazy. And that even runs into the next slide, by the way, is that the game theory of auction. And I've been studying game theory, and I apply game theory to when we run leads, how we make decisions. We create decision trees. And, from a game theory standpoint, if you win an auction without having some kind of inside knowledge, chances are you made a bad choice, because just in the reasoning that you would have to use is that if I get 10 people at an auction and I'm the only one who decided to buy the house at that price, that means the other 9 people would have to be wrong for me to be right. Does that make sense? If they allow you to buy it for the price you paid and they weren't willing to buy it for that price, it means that all 9 of them had to be wrong in order for you to be right. Now, if you're a newer investor and you're sitting there with 9 pit bull investors that have been doing this forever and they know their stuff, there's pretty little chance that you know something that they don't know. Now, since I've done 1,100 houses, most of the time when I win, it's because I have inside information. I might have seen something. I might have got entry to the house. I'm making some assumptions that through my knowledge that I've been able to make. But when you're newer, you don't generally have that advantage. And if you don't have that advantage, chances are you've already lost when you win your first deal there. So I don't recommend doing it when you're new. And on auctions breed emotions. This is the last really big piece of this. But when you're in an auction, people commonly will get what's called auction fever, and auction fever is a real thing. We used to actually do auctions, and I owned an auction company with a partner, and one of the things we seen from the auctioneer standpoint was that people will come and bid, and they will get very emotionally attached to winning. So if you put 10 people in front of an auction, there's always someone who's willing to bid a few extra thousand, and another person a few extra thousand. Next thing you know, the house is going for 20K more than what it was worth because of what we call auction fever and emotional bidding. So it really does breed an emotional decision process, which is not good for real estate investing. And if you combine that with the fact that you're making an emotional decision, you're putting a non-refundable deposit up, you probably didn't get in the house and see it, it's just too much risk when you're new. Now, once you got a good game plan, you're willing to invest in really learning this, the Courthouse steps can be really awesome. Now, also, this is for Baltimore, by the way. So I'm going to let everyone know, and I'm going to be upfront, that there's very different processes in every state. Now, some states are more favorable to the auction process, some are less favorable. So you'll have to figure out what your process is in your state. I would imagine that the more favorable it is to an investor, that the more competition you're going to have. And the less favorable it is, the less competition you're going to have. So really up to you which one you think is best. Personally, I'd like it to be less favorable and harder to do, because that means it would run off a lot of other investors, and then I could go in and find a way to hack it and get a really good result out of it that other people people aren't willing to work. It's a lot like cold calling or getting lists that are hard to obtain. Anytime you have something that has a higher barrier of entry, well, a lot of people aren't willing to work that hard to do this business. They'll just do the easier stuff like sending letters and postcards. Why would they want to do this? It doesn't make any logical sense to do this really hard stuff. So unless you're really in this and you're struggling, you're past like 50 or 70 deals a year, I personally don't recommend this unless you already have experience. Maybe you've already been down the path and figured it all out, then keep doing it if that's what's working for you. But I just say if you've not done it, you're like, I think this could be a great idea. I would recommend it. It's probably not the easiest path. It's the path of most resistance, not the path of least resistance. We always want to go down the path of least resistance and keep it super simple. And that's the key. It's KISS. Keep it super simple, right? Not keep it simple, stupid. We call it keep it super simple. And this is by no means super simple.